Hi, I'm Sister Simone Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice, and I have the honor of being leader of Nuns on the Bus. And today, our virtual bus trip is in St. Louis, Missouri. We're really excited to be at the St. Louis University Parish Church, St. Francis Xavier, and to hear about some of the amazing outreach programs that they are involved in or that they've started. So let's first watch a video to get a feel for their work, and then we'll invite in Father Dan and Christine to talk with us about it. Let's see the video.
The outreach program works with folks in the communities who need IDs and or birth certificates, most commonly both, but sometimes just IDs, sometimes just birth certificates, and we can help them navigate the applications. The guests come and work with volunteers who provide information about how to get this crucial documentation, and we also cover the cost of these items as need be for folks.
Hi, welcome.
People need identification for housing, employment, to get social services, to get child care, to get back into school.
It really helped me out to where I could get all my information to help me with a job, as far as going to the store if they ask you for your ID. And it's basically, it helps you with everything in life because you really need your ID, your birth certificate, and social security card.
Housing. I'm trying to start my life over, so these things, I need these things.
At first it's really hard. I have to have one to get the other, and sometimes I get like the runaround trying to get one document when I have to have the other document to get that document.
In Missouri, a person needs a birth certificate to get their ID in the first place, but let's say I'm born in the state of Michigan. I actually need to present a photo ID in that state to get my birth certificate. But if I need the birth certificate to get the state ID of Missouri, you can see that really creates a catch-22. So the barrier to getting the birth certificate is huge.
And that we see is surrounding proof of address. A lot of our guests are homeless or couch surfing, and they don't have any way to verify where they live because they don't have a place to live. Our program has been able to help by letting people get their mail sent here and use our address so that they have proof of address.
There's the lack of clarity surrounding, different things like getting a social security card. I found that one time I called and they said you could use this. Their documentation on the website says you have to use this. Probably go on and on, but there's a lot of obstacles that I've noticed.
There's a really, really excellent rapport, and being here over COVID-19 has been challenging in a lot of ways, but I would say the volunteer experience before COVID started and then after has been consistent in that we have wonderful, wonderful volunteers. Before COVID-19, a lot of them were retired parishioners of St. Francis Xavier, and these days it's a lot of students, even more students than we ever had before. And getting to know really the people who make the community around SLU and College Church in particular so vibrant has been a pleasure.
And I volunteer at College Church because I want to make sure people get their essential documents so they're able to get a job, get into housing, and that they don't get stuck in a cycle of systemic problems within the city of St. Louis.
Frankly, the people coming here, society would be perfectly happy to ignore and just kind of leave that on their own. And it's just the least we can do to give them a helping hand, to show that they matter, that somebody's caring for them, even in this small, simple way of getting their documentation together so they can get the services that they need. It's not just about providing those documents, providing those resources, but having an encounter and helping people feel like they belong. And they belong in this society, in this community, and that they're being cared for.
It's very humbling to have the opportunity to be able to come in and help people get these vital records that their life can't function without. So it's amazing that I'm able to help people get their life back on track. Now, it's a small thing, just getting people's birth certificate or ID, and it may seem small to me, but in their lives, it makes a world of difference. So, do the small things, because those small things can have a huge impact. Take care. Thank you.
Great. How informative. Now let's welcome in Father Dan and Christine, who can talk to us about how did this happen? How did you get started on this project? I love the word encounter and the fact that you provide such a practical resource. How'd you start?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you heard in the video, the outreach program really is the cornerstone of our social ministry. Our central mission is to facilitate access to Missouri state IDs and birth certificates, especially for people experiencing poverty and homelessness. And we started this program in some form or fashion in the mid-1990s. Because there wasn't an agency doing this work on a large scale, and it's an often overlooked barrier to accessing all of the resources and services that were mentioned in the video and more. And so to this day, we're the only large scale ongoing resource for ID and birth certificate assistance in the region. We see upwards of 3,500 people in a year in our program, and we receive referrals from over 100 different social service agencies, governmental agencies, schools in the region. So we're clear that there is a huge need for this direct work, and that's why we've done it for over 20 years. We're also increasingly clear that we could do it for another 20 years, and that still wouldn't get at the root of the systemic issues related to ID access. So we've also developed an ID access coalition that brings together stakeholders to seek that larger systemic change related to IDs and birth certificates and all of the systemic issues that impact our clients, or our guests, as we sometimes call them. And because of this belief of the connection between direct work and systemic work and how important that is, as you mentioned, this encounter is some insight into those experiences that are affected by these bigger systemic issues. And so that's why you'll see later in this program why we wanted to highlight some of this good organizing and advocacy work that's also being done around access to voting and voting rights, which is a huge issue for all of us, and especially for the folks we see in our program.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, for our viewers, we will be having a part 2 of this conversation, but we wanted to get this base conversation in to talk about the values that you all are engaging in of encounter and meeting, as well as the needs of the clients. And Father Dan, I think this is so innovative that you're doing such a practical service engagement in the context of the parish. Can you talk a bit about that, how that enhances your parish work too?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So it is a decision that was made, I'd say roughly 25 years ago. Previous to that, we were doing what a lot of parishes do, a little of this and a little of that. But what we saw was this incredible need, and as well that there was no one else really engaged in it. So I think the parish made sort of a conscious decision to go all in on providing birth certificates and state IDs, and really trying to do one thing well. And realizing that we also have connections and collaborators and partnerships with the wider service providers and nonprofits in the St. Louis region, so that we didn't feel we had to do everything. But we could do this one thing and really do it well. And I think it just went from there. And again, I suspect part of what you maybe got a little bit of a taste of from the video is shockingly complicated and difficult in some circumstances. And so it really does require a level of expertise and a level of knowing the system and having connections and being able to do that, that really makes something that is so basic that most of us don't even blink an eye about being able to obtain, for a lot of folks is incredibly difficult and crossing different states and different government organizations, so that it really does require to be sort of experts at how to do this. And the folks we have are truly that. I mean, they are and absolutely tenacious in making that happen. So
Wow. I was so struck by that example of Michigan and Missouri. I mean, that really was a catch-22. There was no way to break out of, well, I imagine they found a way to break out of it, but what a challenge. Wow. And also I noticed that I believe it referred to that you all cover the cost of doing this, because this is not, to submit those applications isn't free. So how do you deal with those costs?
We're grateful to have support from our parish and other individuals who contribute towards the cost of those documents, as well as some grant funders that help us with those costs. So basically for in-state birth certificates, we have a voucher system with our local office where we provide a stamped voucher for individuals to redeem. And for the ID offices, there's a few different options of offices to go to, and we provide a check to cover the cost of those documents. For out-of-state birth certificates, that is one of the bigger challenges we encounter, because it can take a little while, especially now there are some states that take a number of months to process mail-in applications for birth certificates, which are really the only applications that are within our budget. And that's one of the barriers that one of our volunteers has noted recently, that in extreme situations, sometimes if there's no other option, we'll try to go through Vital Check, the online option. And there's sometimes security questions that folks can answer, and it costs a lot more money. It also is much easier and quicker that way. So that's a huge barrier. If people don't have the funding or access to the internet, it can take months and months to receive out-of-state birth certificates through the mail.
Wow, what a challenge. And then people are in limbo during that whole period.
Absolutely. As you heard Tess say, you need the birth certificate in Missouri to get your ID. And a lot of folks come to us saying, like, I need my ID now. I have a job interview. I have this Section 8 voucher that's going to come up, and I need my ID in order to access these really important things urgently.
Whoa. Well, okay. So the out-of-state one seems like that would be the most complicated, but it must also be extremely common because we're so mobile as a society, and you're so close to a state border with Illinois just across the river. So how do you deal with this complexity? How do you break through it? Do you have secrets?
We've learned some tips and tricks over the years. There's still new situations that come up all the time that we're trying to troubleshoot in the midst of a pretty busy program. We see a lot of people on Tuesdays when we're open. One of the ways we get around it is there's some states like Illinois that will allow us to apply on someone's behalf. So if we can see some evidence of who the person is, as a social service agency, we can apply on their behalf. So I actually have a stack of birth certificates from Illinois right here that I had applied on a few individuals' behalves. And we also, as I mentioned, in extreme situations, we'll try to use Vital Check online, which is an online resource for applying for birth certificates. And
does Vital Check cover the whole United States then?
Yes, it does.
So it can create some shortcuts for you, but you say it's expensive though.
It's really expensive, so we try to reserve it just for situations where it's really necessary, where there's no other option. And then the other thing that's true too is that we've worked with folks in some really extreme situations who either don't have a birth certificate on file or their name is incorrect on their birth certificate. One of the first people I worked with when I started working here was a woman who was born in Mississippi in the Jim Crow South. She was a Black woman who she had a birth certificate, but it had no first name. And so she never needed a birth certificate with her correct name until it was required for her ID. So she was in her 60s, had never had a birth certificate with her correct name. And it took months and money and lots of time and patience, but we went through the legal name change process to change her name from no name to her correct name so that she could get finally an ID with her name on it.
Wow, that must have been some celebration when she finally got it.
It really was. It was a process.
Oh, oh, too much, too much. Well, I'm curious, Father Dan, how do you? Um, what strikes me about this is that it really is a ministry, a service, and I'm curious about that quality, the spiritual quality that gets supported in this, and how it must be enriching to your parish to have this quality of engagement, of encounter, of doing something so practical and so helpful. How does that work for you all?
Yeah, I think it really is essential. In fact, there are many people who come to Francis Xavier and our parishioners because of this program, because it matters so much to them. That whether it's through contribution or volunteering, that this social outreach is really what kind of roots them in this place, and it's that expression of their faith in the best possible way. So it is a really significant aspect of it. Sometimes you hear about churches or parishes that are trying to be tithing parishes, but when you look at our budget, we are, in terms of our social outreach, that is a significant expenditure on behalf of the parish that we have seen as a value, seen as important to who we are as Christians. And so therefore, that is how we tithe to the parish, is through the support of folks, not just in the neighborhood, but really we attract people from all over Metro St. Louis. Again, when you're the only gig in town, we attract people from all over. So it really is an essential part of what we're doing. And as I mentioned before, I really like the fact that whether we chose this initially or not, it requires us to be collaborative. It requires us to work with other churches, with other religious, with other 501c3s, with the state, with the city. So I love the fact that it embeds us deeper in sort of the wider community, in the wider civic community, in the wider religious community. And I think that really truly matters to people. And yeah, I love it. Christine mentioned the volunteers. We before COVID had this wonderful, experienced, generous group of folks who would come in who are parishioners. A lot of them retired, but now we've had to pivot to the university community, and we're located right on campus. And we're a parish of the Archdiocese, but it's also the spiritual home of the St. Louis University community. So it's wonderful to now have sort of both of those aspects at work, and seeing the students really be able to engage and be generous, and to really be part of this work as well.
Oh yeah, I could see how that happy fault of a COVID-19 is expanding the folks who can do this work. Well, I'm a lawyer and I practiced law for many years in California, and so I deeply appreciate the technical challenges of getting any of these critical documents out of a state. And Christine, thinking of having a birth certificate with no first name, that is like so difficult to deal with. Congratulations on being able to make it through that. Wow. And I can imagine that you have just a lot of grateful folks around the city who also advertise your services. Imagine you don't have to worry about billboard signs or spreading the word.
Yeah, word gets out.
I'll bet. Well, let's bring in our, first of all, let's watch a video that talks about some of your collaborators, and then we can talk about, bring in our other guests and be able to talk about how your work is collaborative with others. Let's pick up on that theme. Okay.
Hi, my name is Clarissa Jackson, and I'm a social worker at Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. Legal Services of Eastern Missouri offers free civil legal services for low-income families and individuals, and I work specifically with the Youth and Family Advocacy Program, which services unaccompanied homeless youth who are aged 19 and under in the St. Louis region. Unaccompanied minors are those who are by themselves, they're facing homelessness without the support or financial stability of a parent or legal guardian. These are youth trying to traverse adult systems to obtain essential services such as healthcare, public benefits, food security, and they're doing this on their own. So with Youth and Family Advocacy Program, we're trying to help youth achieve self-sufficiency, independence, and be able to reach housing stability through a holistic lawyer and social work model. Accessing identification is an enormous problem for the youth we serve. What we found is that many unaccompanied youth are facing homelessness after they've been kicked out of their household or a parent has passed away. When that happens, youth are pretty much catapulted into adulthood overnight, and now they're solely responsible for their financial well-being, their education, and obtaining essential medical care to keep themselves alive. In trying to access crucial services, many youth are roadblocked by the fact that they don't have their state ID, birth certificate, or social security card, which either they failed to grab because they were kicked out at a moment's notice, or because they didn't have the foresight to grab these important documents. What we found is we have to be able to get those documents for our youth before we can even begin our advocacy for them. For many of us, obtaining identification is an inconvenience or a hassle, but it's something that can be easily rectified. For unaccompanied homeless youth, identification means survival. According to the American Psychological Association, homeless youth who are unaccompanied are more likely to experience mental health problems such as depression, anxiety, and PTSD. Homeless youth are also 2 times more likely to go hungry than their non-homeless peers. Also, youth who identify as LGBTQIA who are facing homelessness are 7 times more likely to be a victim of violent crime. Obtaining identification is necessary for youth to fill out applications for jobs, to get housing, but also to get medical care and important and crucial mental health services to help them deal with the trauma that has come with being homeless. Without identification, many homeless youth will possibly engage in risky behaviors just to ensure their own survival. This is why organizations such as St. Francis Xavier College Church are so important to our communities and to the Youth and Family Advocacy Program. Their birth certificate and street outreach team acts as a bridge for our youth to begin their first steps towards self-sufficiency. Without identification, our clients would be denied housing, medical care, food stamps, jobs, and other services essential to their welfare. We refer almost every client to their services, and we are just so excited and happy to be able to call them partners in this work that we do. We simply could not be good advocates for our clients and for our community members without them.
Whoa, what a testimonial. That's fantastic. Okay, let's bring on Maria and Denise Lieberman. So glad you're here. Okay, we got a flavor already for the importance of the work. We talked a little bit about what the work at St. Francis Xavier is at the outreach program. And Maria, can you talk a little bit about your work? And then we'll ask, wait, let's flip this. Denise, why don't you talk about your work? Because I understand you're doing the big election pieces. And Maria, I understand you've got the expo focus. So let's get Denise first, and then we'll go to you, Maria. Okay? So Denise, what are you doing? Introduce yourself and tell us your work here in St. Louis.
Thank you so much for having me here today. It's just such an honor to be part of this tour, and what an incredible program so far. I just have really been so inspired by the videos and the conversation. My name's Denise Lieberman. I am the Director and General Counsel of the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition. We're a nonpartisan statewide network of voter advocates, and our mission is really quite simple: to ensure that every voter is able to cast a ballot. And we're just so proud to be able to partner with St. Francis Xavier College Church and so many other partners across the state of Missouri to help protect the vote. And I really just want to uplift the role in particular that faith-based organizations have played in this effort, which is so critical. Sorry about that. I'm sorry for the beeping. I'm going to try and stop that. Okay, hopefully that did it. I really want to uplift the important role that faith-based organizations have played, especially service faith-based organizations like St. Francis Xavier that are out in the community that are helping ensure that people are able to exercise their voice. So I think too often these debates about the access to the vote get conflated with political debates. And to be sure, we're in a very highly politically charged season right now. I think that's we could probably all agree on that. But the truth of the matter is that the right to vote is about something much, much bigger than politics. It's about who you vote for, of course, but it's about something much bigger. It is really about a moral imperative that your vote is your voice. And we hear that a lot, and sometimes we just sort of forget what it actually means. But it is the way, it is the mechanism that society has that gives you the opportunity to speak as a citizen, speak as a person in a community. It's literally the structural mechanism that says you count, quite literally, right? We count you. Yeah. And so when we put barriers up, when we make people jump through so many hurdles, when we make voting more difficult or less accessible, particularly for our most marginalized citizens, what's that saying? It's society saying you don't count. And we already know that the very people who are most likely to face barriers to the ballot are the very same people whose voices are already most likely to be silenced, are already most likely to be made invisible in the public space, are already less likely to be able to exercise autonomy and self-determination over their own lives. That's really the power of the vote, is it belongs to each of us. And it is the right of all of us to be able to have a say in our own destinies, to be able to exercise self-determination in our lives. That's what the right to vote is. And that is something I think that faith-based communities, especially service-oriented ones like St. Francis Xavier, are so compelling at presenting. The right of all of us. All of us deserve a voice. Everybody in our communities deserves to have a say and deserves to be able to make their own decisions about their lives and the things that are important to it. And so St. Francis Xavier has been active in so many of the efforts to help ensure people have access to the vote. Christine was actually a plaintiff in a lawsuit that we filed. I was the attorney, and Christine was a plaintiff among several others in challenging strict voter ID requirements to vote because of her experiences running the ID access program at St. Francis Xavier. Really revealed the tremendous array of barriers that make it difficult for people to be able to get IDs sometimes. And then when you attach a fundamental right like voting to that, it's really problematic. Christine gave such compelling testimony about the people that St. Francis Xavier services and the barriers that they confront, and really brought those lived experiences to life. So we are working now to ensure that everybody can cast a ballot.
Hold it up so we can see it again.
We run the nonpartisan, this is all nonpartisan, election protection effort in Missouri. This is in collaboration with the National Election Protection Effort. I do want to note that we also have language access hotlines that can speak to voters in other languages. And we we'll have 1,000 volunteers at the polls on election day to be the eyes and ears of voters. We're really the only operation out there that we're not there to sell the voters on anything. We're going to be the only people at the polls who are there just to make sure that voters have the resources and the tools they need. So there you go. So people can call 866-OUR-VOTE. People can text 866-OUR-VOTE. You can go to 866ourvote.org. There's even a chat feature. You can chat with someone. All sorts of ways. The bottom line is this, and then I'll stop. These calls are answered live in real time. And here in Missouri, we actually have a national call center. Calls from people in Missouri are answered by lawyers in Missouri. Wow. So neighbors are monitoring and making sure their neighbors can vote. Local people here, local attorneys here in Missouri are taking calls from other people in Missouri to make sure they can vote. Our goal is that nobody should have to go through the voting process alone. It is unfortunate that we don't do more to make voting easier. I know in our state, lawmakers had opportunities to make voting safer and easier during this pandemic, and instead enacted a needlessly complicated two-tiered scheme that is very complicated for lots of folks. You're not in this alone. Election protection has your back. You never have to leave a polling place without having somebody right then and there to talk to you. Nobody should be turned away at the polls without having help and assistance. And so that's my message here today.
All right, Denise, that's fabulous. And we understand Missouri doesn't have early voting, right?
Well, no, yes and no. So this is part of what's confusing about the new law. Missouri does allow absentee voting, and in fact, it's underway. It began on September 22nd, and you can do that through the mail, or you can go in person if you have a reason that you're going to not be able to vote at the polls on Election Day. And this year, just for 2020, lawmakers also passed a rule allowing any voter to cast a ballot through the mail. And the deadline to request a ballot be sent to you through the mail is tomorrow.
Oh,
so yes, we're really getting down to the wire there, and we really want to make sure that nobody misses out because of a missed deadline. But if people are able to go vote absentee in person, you can do that all the way until Monday, November 2nd, including Saturday, October 31st. For people that aren't able to go during the workday or during working hours, because we know that is a real barrier for a lot of people.
Right. And does Missouri have a provision where if you've made a mistake, because sometimes these absentee ballots by mail are confusing, if you've made a mistake, can you cure it? Can you fix it after it's been submitted?
Not after it's been submitted. So yes, you can fix a mistake, but do it before you submit it. And this is going to be true. So you can, if you get that ballot in the mail, even if you just run out of time to send it back, you can spoil it. You can take it in to vote absentee in person, turn it in, spoil it, get a new ballot. You can even do that at a polling place on Election Day. You can turn in the ballot and get a new one.
Great. Okay, now my people backstage are saying, tell everybody this is Missouri. Missouri. Okay, everybody.
Well, the rules are different in every state. And so it is really important to check the rules in your state because they may differ. What I will say won't differ, though, is 866-OUR-VOTE is the same number all across the country. And it's actually live right now. So no matter where you are in America right now, you can call 866-OUR-VOTE and talk to someone right now, an attorney right now, who can let you know what the rules are in your state.
All right. Oh, Denise, thank you so much for that. All right, let's go to Maria now, because Maria, you've got a specific program that you're working on that is so important for the vote and for really getting folks integrated back into society. So can you unmute and let us know? All right, there you go.
Hi, sure. So hello, everyone. My name is Maria Miller, and I am founder of Our Lives Matter, which is a non-for-profit 501c3. I partnered with Expo earlier this year. I am a core leader of Expo. Expo is ex-incarcerated people organized. We work together to end mass incarceration, to eliminate forms of structural discrimination against formerly incarcerated people, and restore formerly incarcerated people to full participation in the life of our communities. Expo motto is, you have the right not to remain silent. Our goal is to humanize individuals that are currently and previously involved in the criminal justice system. We are assets to our community and should be given opportunity to contribute to our lives and the society in which we reside. So Unlock the Vote will restore voting rights to 60,000 people that are on probation and parole. We will increase voters for the people who have felonies that don't believe that they can vote. Recidivism is reduced when people who have felony convictions engage in civic duty. We have been excluded from the electoral process for far too long. We also have a quote from Jamila Nasheed. This is straight up a bipartisan. movement that needs to happen. Now, she said this will not just impact Democratic votes, this will impact Republican vote as well. Our people have suffocated our ability to gain political and economical power within our community. This country has stolen, smothered our souls, and suffocated our spirit, ripped away from every 1 ounce of dignity. Redlined us and excluded us from buying land and excluding economic power. They have literally slaughtered millions of people out of fear that will gain power through the political process. And now they continue to sabotage with the use of voter suppression. So that is one of our focuses that we are doing with Expo. We also stand together against unfair treatment and dehumanizing inside our prisons here in Missouri. It's been a long, ongoing problem. Beginning back in April, we began to address the issues of the conditions of the Missouri Department of Corrections, as well as focus on the COVID. This was an issue that began way before COVID happened.
Right.
So, what we did as a group is we came together and we started to reach out to those incarcerated and family members. And with the COVID still rising, no, we addressed the governor. He didn't respond, so we sent out flyers. We got a lot of feedback from those incarcerated here in the Missouri Department of Corrections, as well as family members. We went up last Thursday to the governor's mansion to address him on these issues. We haven't gotten any feedback from him, which was expected. We didn't get any feedback in April when we first reached out to him. So us with Expo, that's part of the reason I joined with Expo. I was fighting against prison reform, with my own organization. I met them and we feel like unity is power. So we came together to address the issues inside the Missouri Department of Corrections, which my personal opinion works very well with unlocking the vote because, you have people that are incarcerated. Some of them spend decades and decades paying for a crime that they said they committed. Some of them have committed the crime. Some of them have not committed the crime, but you paid your dues. So just like they're stripping them down in the prisons, they get out of prisons, they pay their dues to the inside the walls. They're now on probation and parole. They did their time on probation and parole, but you still can't vote. Many of those votes will get the people that we need in office to make the necessary changes. So it's an ongoing process. It doesn't stop at the governor's mansion. It didn't start at the governor's mansion.
Right.
But we have to, we believe in continuing the fight, working together, joining with other organizations, coming together in numbers, because it starts inside the prisons and it comes back out to the streets, even with the birth certificates and the social security cards. It's just a big ongoing problem that no one's paying attention to. No one's addressing the issues. So they're allowed to get away with all these things, or you're going to charge a person for the rest of their life for a crime that they committed, not even allowing them the human rights of voting. So I think we just feel like it's very important. We look forward to the challenges and, partnering with other organizations and coming together in unity to get these changes that we need inside the prisons, outside of the prisons, and helping individuals get second chances and new ways of living, new beginnings.
Oh, Maria, I think what you're pointing out is so much about the structural racism and the structural prejudices that go on in our society that we really need to look at. And part of it is this demand for documents, that you have documents when you get out. I can't imagine, having been in prison, that you've got the documents you need. So I would imagine that a first stop would be to try to do that. But then what you're talking about in terms of the right to vote and the fact that you've paid your dues, it just seems to make sense. People should be able to reintegrate into society.
But that goes back to the entire, and this is why I began prison reform. I lost a brother that was dehumanized and murdered in the Missouri Department of Corrections. That's how Our Lives Matter began. Wow. And when I met up with Expo, we met at a prison town hall meeting, and we just, kind of started working together. But this goes back to, and this is just my personal opinion, it goes back to the dehumanizing and the stripping people down from human rights. The right to vote is a human right, correct?
Yeah.
So the right to be treated like a human being, cruel and unusual punishment. When we go inside the prisons, that's one of the reasons I fight. These individuals are being dehumanized.
Wow.
We can tell you all this story, but for you to see the letters that I received, to see the letters from these people incarcerated, from the family members, and so we're sitting here like, okay, what do we do? What do we need to do? This is why I feel like Unlock the Vote is so important, because you have a group of people that are fighting for this change. And you have people like, we have 5 people on here now that can possibly come together to get these voting rights restored. But it starts, like I said, in the courts, in the prison. You have dehumanized these people. You have stripped them away from their human rights. But it doesn't stop or start there. It goes back until when you get out of jail. Okay, speaking of the birth certificate, everyone needs a birth certificate. Everyone needs a Social Security, even to get a job, even to get any type of assistance. What does our system have to help the people? What do you don't even, you spend 10, 15 years, even if you spend 2 or 5 years in prison, when you get out of prison, you don't have what you need to begin to function in a normal society.
Wow, I never thought about that. That when the day you get out, you don't have anything. Whoa.
Nothing.
How do you begin a life if you have nothing in our society? I mean, some societies are more verbal and you return to family and all this, but not here. Wow.
What about the person that spent 30 years in prison? They may have lost their mother, their father, their children. People die when you're in jail and you spend that much time. So you come out to a society where you have nothing. So what are the odds of you coming into a society where you don't even have a birth certificate and a Social Security card? Let's know nobody really wants to hire a felon. You can't vote. You can't. What are the odds of you being successful and not going back? I just feel like the system needs to be restructured. They don't have a chance. You need a strong support system. You need people that are in your corner. So I commend you all for what you're doing. Because sometimes all a person needs is a little bit of hope and a little bit of encouragement. And that's what Expo Our Lives Matter is about. We're working on things to try to help these people when they come back into society so they don't have to go back. If we can build our communities around us, we can stop. And this is just my personal goal, just from dealing with gun violence, the courts, death. If we are currently working to help these people, to build them up, to encourage them, we can begin to change our community. Okay? So those are just some things that we're working on. We're fairly new to St. Louis, but they do have other organizations around. We also have participatory defense that we're doing, which is we teach families how to fight for their loved ones. Okay.
Wow.
So like the courts may have failed them, they're trying to help them get out of prison. So we help them create these packets. What these packets consist of is letters from the family, letters from, like, say, if one of you knew them, the community. So with that being said, we create these packets that could include pictures, a home plan, and we show them how to fight. But the thing about it, they don't have to fight alone. We stand with them and help them through the process. And like when we went up to the governor's mansion, we have this number. We asked everyone to write legislative. We can't do this alone. We need legislative, and I believe that ties directly into Unlock the Vote. We have legislative, and I feel like this. I'm sorry, you all. I'm a little frank. If you can't help these people and you know that this is wrong, then you should get out of office and put somebody in there with a little bit of compassion to help them. You're secretly building a new prison around Missouri. What about the halfway houses? Missouri has 2 halfway houses. What about the resources? What about the programs? So we were just asking anyone that wants to get involved to text Expo at 31996.
Okay. Say that again, because my people backstage will get it and they'll run it in a little ribbon. So what's the number to text?
You could text 31996.
Okay.
Or you can email.
And do you have to say a specific word in your text, or you just say I'm interested?
They'll know. They'll know. This is
Okay.
something we created last week. Also, with that, you could reach Expo at mcu-expo@mcustl.com. I can also be reached. I do a lot of the work with Expo as far as the prison reform. We all support each other as a team. A lot of the things that I do, I'm supporting Unlock the Vote. I'm definitely with that. I'm definitely with getting in the face of these legislators, even the governor. That's another story. But I could, my email is mywayout2018@gmail.com.
All right.
I can also
We'll get it up there. We'll get it up there. Actually, what I think we can also do is we'll post it on our website. So when folks look at this video and hear you, Maria, get stirred up by you, Maria, and want to be a part of your community, we'll have it up there so people know how to connect you. Okay.
Thank you. I have a phone number also, 314.
Oh, no, don't go putting your phone number up there. God only knows where this is going to go. That's enough.
It's a Google number. It's not mine. It's something I use for the families. You know,
okay.
At how many people have reached out on that number for help. Again, the key is to teach them how to fight for their loved ones. There's together you're creating an army. Because I can sit up there and I could tell that story. Like some of those went to Jeff City with us last Thursday. If I get on here and I begin to tell you those stories, it was not the same effect of you hearing those from those family members, those incarcerated.
Totally.
So that's how, I feel like you start to build the army, because it's not just me speaking, it's people that are now joining forces with Our Lives Matter and Expo and Nuns on the Bus, and we're standing together and Unlock the Vote and changing the prison systems. So we're standing together in numbers.
Amen. Well, that's the thing that I see common among all four of you, is this piece about building a community who stands together, who works together. Denise, I was so touched when you said no one has to vote alone. You don't have to deal with this alone. There's a phone number to call. You can do it before you leave the polling station. And Christine and Father Dan, what you're creating there out of the parish is that service that weaves people back in and tries to ensure that we're working together to make a difference. It is so critical that we have a community, because it's sort of like the opposite of what you're saying, Maria, is that the prisons, people are lost, ignored, and not seen. And if we have community pressure, then we can make a little change. So I'm betting. And I'm curious, we only have a few minutes left. This always goes so fast. This is my problem. But I'm curious, I'm going to ask each of you, what do you think is the most important thing or attitude or aspect of your work that builds community? What do you do to build community? How is that working in such a challenging time? And because Father Dan, you're sort of maybe the expert on community, or we would think so. No, he's backing away. Could you start us off though? What do you do how do you build community here, both among the outreach program, but also within the parish? What do you think is key? And then we'll go Father Dan, Christine, Denise, and we'll let you get the last word. How's this?
Sure. Yeah, I think for me, first off, is thinking of community as expansive rather than limiting. So, we've got a fairly complicated parish where, we're doing all of the outreach that Christine talked about. We serve a university community. We do 100 weddings a year. We do all of these aspects, and I consider all of that part of the community, including our partners and the people that we collaborate with and work and learn from. So for me, community is always expansive. And it is about being very deliberate in making those connections and naming what community is. And so it's those connections and those bonds that are always being more. right? And it always, one connection leads to another connection, leads to another connection. And so it's always being about not simply defining who you are and who your community is and who it isn't, but looking for opportunities to always make it more and more expansive.
Abundance. I love that idea. Abundance. That's perfect. Christine, what aspect do you think is important for you as you build community among your the guests as well as the folks who come and do some of this work?
Yeah, I think the word expansive came to mind for me also. Actually, we must spend too much time together, Father Dan. But I think we've really been challenged to grow our definition of community since COVID and our idea of how community functions, because so much of the parish has been parish activities have been remote and virtual. And so I think I don't take it for granted that we have this opportunity once a week that is in person, masked and all of that. But to really have an in-person community, while at the same time our volunteers who have been with us for years and years, many of them are still participating offsite in new ways and in ways that we never could have imagined we'd need a volunteer role for. So it sort of forced us to be creative. It's also highlighted that we are a bottleneck in the region for these services. So it's kind of compelled us to think creatively about how we even envision our program community. Is it just on site, or could we imagine going out into the community? And that's something that is really a strong consideration for us right now, just because it's not safe for many people to come on site to our program. It's not practical for us to think that we could do this in one location for years and years. And so I'm just really grateful to make the connections with Denise and Maria today. So many of the folks we see have been recently released from prison or jail. There are so many of the challenges that I mentioned that are particularly challenging for people who have been incarcerated. Denise made the connection between our experiences of seeing people's difficulties getting IDs and recognizing why photo ID should not be connected to voting. And so being able to make those connections, there's probably 10 more partners I could bring on this call, 100 more partners I could bring on this call where there's connections like that. So making those connections and also challenging our idea of what community can look like in this very strange time.
Yeah, strange time is right. And I just want to follow on so our viewers know that we're going to put up a few other videos from your collaborators, your partners at this point, so folks can get a perspective of the breadth of the people or the organizations that depend on your serving this really important specific function. Okay. Denise, you've got a whole a national cadre of folks doing amazing work. How do you create community among them with that shared experience and shared commitment?
That's such a great question, and I'm so glad that you asked it. Because really, I think maybe if COVID has made so many of us realize anything, it's that we rely on being in community with one another, and that's so very important. In the area of voting rights, I mean, first and foremost, I think it's just really important to uplift people's stories. That so often we, engage in sort of othering of people because we don't understand them, and that's of course what leads to bias and prejudice and so much else. And I think that with respect to voting rights, people sort of don't, unless they know somebody, unless they can meet somebody, who has challenges getting to a DMV office because it's not on a bus line and it's only open until 4:00 in the afternoon and not available on weekends. And, challenges getting an ID because they don't have an original copy of their birth certificate or there's an error on it. People who just walk through the world in various states of privilege, as all of us do in various ways, may not realize how other people are experiencing the very same sort of societal tools. So I think, helping tell people's stories, and that's something that I find very, very important in the context of doing legal work and litigation and as a community lawyer. But then it's also uplifting the leadership of impacted communities know what they need to do and know what they want to do. And people who can help should help from the sidelines, from behind the scenes, and step aside and let impacted people lead. That's part of conferring dignity, is that everybody has the right to decide for themselves what they want to do. On a more practical level, just in terms of our coalition in Missouri, since the onset of the COVID pandemic, we moved all of our meetings to Zoom. And as much as we all have Zoom fatigue, it actually has been a really, I think it's been a very sort of community uplifting sort of experience, because we have people from all across the state who come together every Monday morning and can talk about the things that they're doing. And what I think it makes people realize is that you're doing this great thing over here in St. Louis, and somebody else is doing this really neat thing over in Kansas City. And maybe there's an opportunity to collaborate, to share best practices, to share information, and just frankly to realize that all of us are in it, sort of in it together. And we may be coming at it from different angles. The role that, say, St. Francis Xavier College Church plays by doing sort of direct services in the community may be a really different one than the League of Women Voters plays in providing, palm cards or educational materials, which may be a very, very different one than the disability advocacy groups play in helping provide access. But collectively, I think being all together in the same space, even if it's a virtual space, sort of helps people realize that it takes all parts of that prong to kind of come full circle, and that there's really a role for all of us. I'll just share really quick something that just tickled me on the call yesterday, because we ended up partnering with the Repertory Theater of St. Louis. That is, they wanted to do stuff on voting rights, and they're like, well, I guess we could work at the polls or do this. And I said, do what you do best. And they have actors, and they created scripts, and they made videos about voting, and so it's just really neat to me to see that. And I firmly believe that all of us have something valuable to contribute to the conversation. And the work of protecting people's rights really actually requires all of our skills. I am not artistic, so thankfully the artistic people did that piece of it. And that's what it takes, is all of us have something to give, and all of us have a story to tell. And when we share our stories, I think that brings us more in community with one another.
Absolutely. Thank you, Denise. Okay, Maria, you get the last word. Your story for me is all about community and building community with your people. So what do you think is the essential element for community for you?
I totally agree with everything each person has said here today. This is where I kind of go to my little emotional side.
Your gift. You are a gift.
Thank you. Even like I said, dealing with gun violence, to the courts, to crimes, to the prisons, to the coming back outside, beginning a new life. I think the first thing, we have to address the roots. We have to address the root of the problem. If we never get to the root, we can never devour it, okay? One of the things I have with the prisons, and I'll take this from the courts to the prisons, back out here to the voting and the restoring lives and, accountability. I have a big thing where I say, hey, a lot of people that I advocate for in the prisons, the prison holds them accountable, but the staff is not being held accountable. Legislators not being held accountable. They're allowed, again, it does something to me that they're allowed to do these things to people and no one, and we just sit back and we let them do it. I'm not saying like sit back, but what can you do? What can you do? Yeah. What can you do? It's again, it's the unity. I love that word. It's not only the unity, it's the love and the genuine and the compassion. So the first thing I think that we need to do is we need to address these things at the root. When we address these things to the root, I was asked this question. I was doing a podcast on COVID, and the man I'm doing this, he's with MCU. He said, "What can a person like me do to help a movement like what you're doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He said, "A white privileged person." I said, "Great question, Kevin." I said, "Once we expose these people, okay, so we know about Unlock the Vote, and we know about how they're holding in they don't like to be called inmates, those incarcerated. When they get out, they can't even vote. A lot of people don't know about this because it's not an issue that people care about because they've committed a crime, right? So I think the first thing after we get past is the exposure. So once we address the root, we expose these issues. Like we're doing now. We talk about these things and we keep talking about them and we keep going after them. Like that last Thursday, it isn't stop restore that governor's mentioned. It's time to get the ball rolling now because he has an answer. We got an election coming up. Address these issues, expose these issues, come together in unity. Members teaching these families how to fight. When you have, I'm going to say, thousands of people incarcerated, so we can get all these organizations together and we could stand, but when you got 100 families from MDOC that are standing with you, it's numbers.
Amen.
You get in their face and, that's what I call we're knocking at the door nicely. Hey, Governor Parsley, we got these issues. Hey, legislator, we got these issues. But when we come together in numbers and we're like, we won't go or whatever the church do, that's what I call boosh. We're kicking the door in now. We came nicely.
Amen.
We're not physical. We're not burning up anything. We're not busting out any windows, but we're standing together in unity. That unity is a push.
Yeah.
We're open that door eventually.
Amen. Amen.
You're ripping the people away from the communities. What resource? I mean, I know I said this before, but when you get out of prison and you have to fight for a birth certificate in the Social Security card, tell me this. Just look at this. What does the community have for you? Like, what are we doing with our youth, with our corrupt neighborhoods? We got to start building these things up and building people up. And I believe that will create a big change.
Amen.
Not just in the communities, it all spirals around. And I believe people don't understand this. It's the unity. Each one of you said that today.
Yep. Okay. That is the perfect word to end on because, okay, listeners, there's a piece for you to do to help make this a reality because Maria is absolutely right. It's a unity. We each do our part. And Denise, as you were talking, I was thinking in the Christian scriptures, they have this idea of us being one body, that we're all working together as one body, but everybody has a different part to play. And I think, Maria, today, you were sort of the nerve endings, firing, brain going power to get us moving together. I'm so grateful to Father Dan and Christine for the work that you're doing on the very specific work that is like a key to a doorway that folks then get the capacity to be seen in our society. And Denise, praise God, you're doing this work to protect this vote, this election, and into the future. So I just want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you to all of you for your engagement in St. Louis and the state of Missouri for making community, making change, and welcoming folks back from prison, making sure every vote counts, and then making sure that we all have the identity and are seen in our society. So thank you so much. We'll see next time. I hope we can come and visit in person on our bus, and we won't just do it virtually, but at least we got to do this virtually. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.